Out of all the fundamental questions that we have about life and the progress science has made over the course of time, I find it astonishing how little we know about our own brains. Neurobiology is a fascinating field of research, but even with all the progress that we have made, some questions remain unanswered. Why do we dream? Are we really ever conscious? Are we in control over our own minds? I'm in no way an expert when it comes to these questions, but during my psychology studies, I did try to educate myself more to fulfill this deep need that I've always had for exploring the unknown. Something I learned and found particularly interesting is the way in which everything in our brains and bodies is somehow connected. Our senses, our memories, our emotions, they work together in remarkable ways. If you've ever walked down the street and smelled the scent of somebody who used to be in your life, you know what I'm talking about. The bittersweet nostalgia. While the olfactory system seems to be especially strong in activating emotion, the other senses are quite powerful as well. It happens to me a lot with music. Turn on a song from 2009 and I'm transported right back to that sweet teenage melancholy. Except with the sound that I heard the other day, the memories weren't sweet. They were buried so deep within me that all they did was leave a feeling of shock and terror, which no matter how hard I tried, I simply couldn't make sense of. Dun 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 dun. It was the jingle that the show would start with. I was sitting in my car driving down to my mother's place when I heard it. It belonged to some regional fast food restaurant. Nothing too special, but it wasn't the ad that made me worry. It was the jingle that they had used. The short melody is what woke up the blurry memory somewhere in the back of my mind. As I heard this typical early 2000s tune, I drove down to the next gas station to park. Suddenly, I couldn't focus on the street anymore. My breathing got heavy as if there was a big stone in my chest. Something had just been activated inside of my mind. Something that I had entirely forgotten about for the past decade. Dr. Worley's Adventure Club. Dr. Worley always had a big bright smile on his face, even when he talked in a more serious tone. His voice was shrill and jolly, but deep and rough at the same time, a sound that suddenly made its way back to my ears. Wonderful afternoon, adventurers and explorers, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you as excited as we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? That's what followed the jingle. I saw Dr. Worley standing in the middle. He had long fuzzy hair and would wear peculiar suits in the weirdest color combinations. Next to him were children. I closed my eyes and tried to remember their faces or even their names, but it was too long ago. I laughed out loud as I started to calm down more. I couldn't believe how I had just blocked this memory out of my mind. When I was 10 or 11, all I wanted to be was an actor. I was a passionate kid, and when I wanted something, I would do absolutely anything to get it. I'm not sure how exactly it happened. I think I saw an ad somewhere about a new show casting young actors, and while I don't remember the casting process, I knew that I was a part of the show. It must have ended when I was 13 or something, because that's when my mom and I moved away for her new job. I started my engine again and drove to my mom right away. I suddenly had so many questions. My mother wasn't home yet, so I decided to do some online research first, but the thing is, I can't find anything about it, even now. The show wasn't too big and maybe even something more regional if I remembered correctly, but I would assume that I would at least find something on YouTube. For a moment, I doubted if it even really happened. As I said, the memories were blurry and it could have been that I had dreamt about it or something. If I had been the star of a show, I wouldn't have simply forgotten about it. I mean, I would have told my friends or something. This was just so weird, but if it wasn't true, then who the heck was Dr. Worley? And why can I not suddenly get that jingle out of my head? Alex? I heard my mother say in a panicked tone. I hadn't even heard her come inside. I turned around to see a look of surprise and fear on her face. Hey Mom, I told you that I was coming over yesterday, remember? I laughed. Oh, yes, of course, honey. She smiled and walked over to give me a hug, and then her eyes went over to the laptop. Worley, she mumbled and her expression darkened. Yeah, Mom, I need to ask you. It's so strange, but was I part of some strange children's show? I felt foolish even asking the question. My mother walked straight to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of wine. She offered me one, but I shook my head. I haven't thought about this in years. She laughed, but I could swear that I saw her eye twitch as she said those words. You know, honey, I was very busy back then with work and you were alone a lot. I felt guilty and you seemed to enjoy acting so much and those other kids really liked you. So it was real, I interrupted her. My mom nodded and took a big gulp from her glass. You were really young when it started. When your contract expired, you were already becoming a teenager and I think you started regretting it. Kids change a lot at that age, you know. You thought that it was childish and even made me destroy all the tapes. She walked back to the living room and I couldn't help but feel like she was hiding something. Okay, Mom, sorry, but this is super weird. How the heck did I completely forget about those years? My mom looked at me with a concerned look on her face. Why was the show canceled? I asked. Oh, you don't remember? I shook my head. Listen, Alex, you're almost 25 now. You've had a nice and normal life, and that's all I ever wanted. Sometimes there's a good reason we don't remember particular times in our lives. Sometimes it's better to keep things buried. Mom, you're freaking me out, I exclaimed. She sighed. I wasn't the best mother back then. I spent far too little time with you and I regret it deeply. But it's also the reason why I didn't see your show much. You'd be picked up by your agent and I was happy about that. I tried watching the tapes they gave me then, but I couldn't make much sense of it, you know. It was true. My mom didn't have much time for me when I was younger. I mainly got raised by babysitters and myself, but that was a long time ago. It couldn't be the only reason that my mom was acting so strangely. Okay, Mom, I honestly don't care. I don't even remember it. Just why did it get canceled? I asked, slightly annoyed. She made a long pause but finally answered. The show was really popular for a while, but then strange things started happening. Children would disappear and leave notes saying that they were going on an adventure. You know, kids disappear all the time. It's not something we like to talk about, but apparently, the notes were all strangely similar. And then there were the suicides. She had finished her glass of wine and went back to the kitchen for a refill. What are you talking about? My heart started racing. Kids like to copycat. Maybe they heard about other children doing it in the news somehow, or I don't know. Look, this was a long time ago. Obviously, it had nothing to do with the show, but people always need to blame someone when things go to crap, right? So it got canceled, and it was honestly for the best anyway. You had grown too old for that stuff. What? How are you taking this so casually? I started shouting. My mom shot me an angry look. Did you just come to visit me so that you could ask questions and shout at me? She hissed. I looked at the ground. I guess maybe these memories reminded her of a time where our relationship wasn't the best. But I don't think she understood how stressful it was for me to suddenly remember something so odd about my past. I needed more information, but I knew that I wouldn't get them from my mom. I had lost contact with the friends that I had as a child, so that wasn't an option either. I texted some of my middle school and high school friends, but nobody seems to have ever heard of a show with some Dr. Worley. I hardly slept that night. As I was lying in my old bedroom, having that annoying jingle stuck in my head, more memories started coming back to me. Memories of Dr. Worley's laugh and the stick that he always had with him, with a purple and yellow swirl. It looked like a big candy cane. The rest of us all wore one specific color each. During every episode, we had the same outfit. There was a boy in green, a girl in yellow, another girl in blue, and I was purple. I had the visuals and the sounds, but not the content. I have absolutely no idea what those adventures were that we went on. And the weirdest part is that all the memories I did have were about the show. None were about the moments of us filming them. It made sense that I thought that I had made it up. I would still be doubting it if my mom hadn't just confessed that it was real. My eyes shot wide open and I couldn't help but grin as I got an idea. I got out of bed and slowly opened my door so that I wouldn't wake my mom sleeping next door. I tiptoed towards these stairs that went to the attic and I climbed up. My mom was the kind of person who never threw anything away, which made it even weirder that she hadn't kept any of the tapes. But I remember distinctly that she had kept many boxes with old toys and other stuff from when I was a kid. When I moved out for college, we brought some more of my many things up here and I saw many boxes from our old home. After rummaging through old stuff for what must have been hours, I finally sighed and gave up. I couldn't believe that there was not a single piece of evidence from this strange time of my life. Disappointed, I went back to my room so that I could try to get at least a little bit of sleep. I took a look at my phone and finally, the hope was back. I had gotten a text from Helen. I had texted her earlier asking if she had remembered the show. She lived next door and went to middle school with me. This is so strange, I just thought about this the other day. I meant to text you, but I had been so busy with work. How are you doing, Alex? She had sent this a few minutes ago. Helen works as a nurse now, so I guess she was on her way to work. Helen, so glad to hear from you. Sorry, I know this is super weird. We definitely need to catch up soon. But can you tell me what you remember about the show? Like any tiny detail would already help. She replied a few minutes later. I don't know anything about the show. Your mom would never let us watch it, remember? And it wasn't on TV here. But I remember how we once video chatted with one of your friends from the show. It must have still been MSN times. That was all the information Helen had, but it was all the clues that I needed. Turns out that I could still access my MSN Messenger contacts, one of the perks of keeping the same Hotmail account for years. And funny enough, there were a couple of people whose names I didn't remember. I sent each of them an email, trying not to sound too much like I was going crazy. But maybe there was a chance that one of them was actually one of my actor friends. It took a couple of days, but 2 people responded. The first one was somebody called Janie, or at least that's what it said in the address. But the email wasn't exactly helpful. All it said was, "Don't ever contact me again." I kept staring at the screen, wondering whether the real issue with the show wasn't what happened on screen but behind it. It was a scary, messed up thought, but maybe there was something that Dr. Worley did. Something that made me want to forget. It would also explain why my mother acted so weird when the topic came up. I wondered whether she made up the thing about children disappearing and the suicides to distract me from something traumatic. My stomach started to turn on the thought of that. I almost decided to let it go. I started thinking that Mom was right and that sometimes it might be better to not bring up memories that we tried to forget. But then I got another email. Wow, didn't think that I would ever hear from you again. I have the tape but not online. I can send it to you. The boy in green. The tape, as in one. I hesitated at first. I know sending your address to a stranger isn't very smart, so I gave him the address of a parcel station where I could pick it up as well as my phone number. I asked some more questions, but the only reply I got was this one. "It wasn't our fault, Alex. Don't listen to what they say." 2 days later, I finally received the tape. When Mom was at work, I got the old VHS player from the attic. My hands were shaking as I put the tape in. That melody appeared. "Wonderful afternoon, adventurers and explorers, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you as excited as we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? His voice sounded even more distorted than I remembered. May I introduce you to our main explorer, Alex? I saw a 10-year-old version of myself jump into the screen. I had a big smile on my face and waved furiously. And these are my buddies, Lee, Janie, and Millie, Child Me said. The other kids appeared behind me. What's today's adventure? They shouted in unison. The energy was definitely a little too high, but nothing too strange for some old kids show. Nothing too worrying, at least. Except, after that moment, everything we said sounded somehow like gibberish. I wondered if that was part of the concept, but it did feel very weird. I kept listening to the nonsense, but at the same time grabbed my phone. I wanted to send Lee, the boy in green, another email. Are you happy? I heard my own voice say. I looked back to the television and was surprised to see the camera zoomed into my face. Something about it looked somehow off. Not just the gigantic smile that I had, but something about my facial structure was odd. I decided that it was probably too much stage makeup, as the other kids looked a bit weird as well. All of a sudden, the smile disappeared, and young Alex looked a lot more serious. You know she still doesn't love you, right? She never had and never will. I felt like I had missed something important, but none of the things said before had made any sense. It didn't even sound like English. The young version of me started laughing. The camera zoomed again, and now the other kids were in the picture. Lee, Millie, and Janie were standing in the back all laughing. In front of them, I saw that someone was lying on the ground. It looked like another kid, but dressed in regular clothes. It was difficult to recognize what gruesome things were going on back there, until the camera moved closer. The eyes of the young boy were open wide. He wasn't moving. The big candy cane was shoved inside of his stomach, staining his clothes red. I held my breath. This couldn't be real. This was supposed to be a kid's show. Obviously, there was no way that they could ever screen something like this, and at first I wondered if Lee had sent me this as a prank. Maybe it was some macabre off-screen joke. The boy, I came closer again and started speaking directly towards the camera. Remember how much fun we had, Alex. Let's do it again. And that's where the tape ended. I noticed that I was still holding my breath. This had to be a prank. Why else would I be talking directly to myself? Still, for some reason, I couldn't bring myself to rewatch the tape. I don't know how long I was just sitting there, trying to remember anything useful when my phone started ringing. It was an unknown number. Did you watch it? I heard a male voice speak. Lee? I asked. He was quiet for a while. It was a joke, right? I mean, we were young and stuff, but that was messed up. I added and laughed nervously. I hadn't seen the tape for years. I didn't remember any of what was happening in it, but I don't think it was a joke, he finally said. What the? It had to be. I even said my name directly to the camera, I responded. What are you talking about, Alex? You didn't say anything in that video. It was just me talking, and I told myself to die. This time I stayed silent. Maybe Lee was screwing with me, but why would he do that? We hadn't spoken to each other in over 10 years. I have to go now. Don't show this video to anyone else. Wait, Lee, I said, but he had already hung up. It probably goes without saying, but I felt fairly agitated after the call with Lee. Instead of getting answers, I was left with even more questions. It didn't help either that my mom acted even stranger around me and seemed to be avoiding me at all costs. I decided to go for a run so that I could try to empty my head a little, but on my way out I was stopped by Helen. I had seen her a couple of times when visiting my mom in the past years, but besides the occasional small talk or birthday wishes, we hadn't been in much contact. I guess that's what just happens when you grow older. Life happens and you lose touch with your childhood friends. I wonder if that's what happened to me and my actor colleagues as well, or whether there was more to it. After seeing that tape last night and talking to Lee, I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Alex, Helen walked over and gave me a big hug. I can't believe you've been here for days without saying hi, she said as we sat down at the porch to catch up. Sorry, I meant to, but I got a little distracted, I said. It felt strange that only a few days had passed since I sat in the car where that strange jingle activated something buried inside of me. I felt like I had just woken up from a dream just to realize that I had entered a nightmare. Hey, no worries, I've been pretty busy too, but as of today, I'm officially on summer break, she exclaimed and raised her arms in the air. Summer break? I thought you were working already, I asked. I went back to school to study medicine. Oh wow, we really needed to catch up, I laughed. That's awesome. Yeah, it's great. Anyway, how are you? Did you find out about that show that you did as a kid? There it was. The knot in my stomach tightened again. Helen was pretty much my best friend growing up. She even remembered talking to one of my friends from the show when we were younger. I took a deep breath and proceeded to tell her everything that had happened in the last days. All the weird memories that came back to me which I couldn't explain. The weird conversation with my mom, the tape, and the phone call with Lee. I kept speaking without even taking a break, and she sat and listened to all of it. I know how insane this sounds. I still think that the tape was just some weird prank from Lee. Helen stayed quiet for a while. But that doesn't explain your mom being weird about it, she finally said. I mean, maybe she feels guilty or something, I don't know. But I don't know, maybe I'm going crazy. But my gut tells me that there's so much more to it. If I could only remember. I did find it a little strange that you forgot about it. It wasn't that long ago, and it's not really something that you would just forget about, you know. I nodded. But that's what troubles me the most, is that the phone call you had with him. You haven't talked to this guy in years, and suddenly, he tells you that some young version of him told him that he should die. Whatever happened or whatever is going on, it sounds like he might need some help. Did you try to contact him again? She asked. I bit my lip. I hadn't called him again. I basically threw my phone in the corner after the call and I tried to forget about it. Of course I couldn't. I shook my head. I should have, it's just, after seeing the tape, I couldn't really think straight. Can I see it? Helen asked. I was probably even more nervous showing her that tape than when I watched it myself. But she listened to everything I said and she seemed to be understanding. She didn't make me feel guilty or crazy or anything. I was glad that I had opened up to her. Helen sat down on the sofa as I inserted the tape back in the player. My hand started trembling. I wasn't ready to watch the madness again, so I turned my face towards her instead of the television. Wonderful afternoon, adventurers and explorers, and welcome, welcome, welcome. Are you as excited as we are for another episode of Worley's Adventure Club? Yikes. Dr. Worley looks more like Dr. Molesty, Helen joked. I stayed silent as I observed her reactions. Ah, look at that, what a cutie. You didn't tell me you were the leader of the group. Oh, and that's Lee, right? The one in green, yeah, I said without turning to the screen. Yeah, he was cool, a bit edgy, she laughed, but I guess we all were in 2009. Okay, now I don't get it anymore. What age group was this made for? She asked and raised an eyebrow. There it was. She must be seeing the messed up murder scene, I thought. For some reason, she stayed weirdly calm. I finally turned my gaze to the television, but I didn't recognize what was going on. It didn't look like the scene that I had seen yesterday. The four of us had a treasure map and were exploring something. The imagery reminded me of Willy Wonka's chocolate factory. There was no blood and no child lying on the floor, but it had to be the same tape that I saw yesterday, as I had gone back to the moment where I had started. Like it looks like some scavenger hunt, but what the heck is that language? Helen asked. It was the same gibberish that I had heard when I had watched the tape. Wait, hand me the remote. She rewound the tape back to the starting moment, the moment where Dr. Worley introduces us. She got close to the screen and took a photo of my face. Then she went forward to the scavenger hunt and did the same thing again. What the? Helen mumbled. That doesn't look like your face. It doesn't look like a face at all. Did they make you wear masks? She handed over the phone and I scrolled back and forth. She was right. It was the same thing that I had noticed yesterday. My face looked strange, but this wasn't just makeup. The proportions were slightly off, as if somebody had plastered a second face on top of mine, but only in the later frames. We checked again and it was the same for the other faces. Maybe, I muttered. I honestly don't remember anything about the filming part. It would be strange to leave the introduction normal but change your looks for the rest. Or maybe the intro was something that they always played. Are there any more episodes? I don't know, Lee only sent me this one, I answered. This is really disturbing, she whispered. We should try to call him. It took about 6 times, but finally Lee picked up. I wasn't really sure what to say, but Helen took control pretty quickly. After reminiscing about old times for a while, Lee seemed a lot more relaxed, and I'm not sure how else to describe it, but he seemed normal. I was still a bit skeptical, but hearing them talk about regular life helped ease my nerves a little. Finally, she got to the point. So, Alex and I watched the tape. Are there different videos? 'Cause he saw something else than I did. No, it's one tape, one video. There is just this one episode. I probably shouldn't have sent it, but it's been creeping me out. I constantly have nightmares and... He stayed quiet for a while. I haven't talked to anyone about this except my therapist. I wanted to destroy the tape, but then I got that mail from Alex. I had almost forgotten about you, man. Yeah, me too, I said. I hadn't said anything since we had started the call, even though we had the speaker on. You shouldn't have shown it to her, though. I warned you about that. It's okay, I didn't find that scary at all. It was cute. Helen chimed in. So, this might be a little weird, but why don't we meet up? We're old enough now to drive, she then suggested. Lee stayed quiet for a while. Yeah, screw it, why not? But could you come here? I can't really leave. I'm taking care of my grandpa. It all happened really fast, but there we were, driving to the town where I was born, the place that I had almost forgotten. There were a lot more trees surrounding the town than I had remembered. We passed the sign to Fairway. I remembered how Mom always talked about visiting the town sometime, but we never actually did. Martin, that's kind of a nasty name, Helen said as we passed another sign to a town. It's actually pretty nice. We went there a couple of times to go to the farmer's market. Well, the few times that Mom was around. Helen gave me a sympathetic smile as we drove through more trees. And finally, there it was. The big sign saying, Welcome to Wotton, a vivid but gray town somewhere in the middle of nowhere. I don't know what I was expecting. Some part of me kept thinking this was all some messed up trap and that we would be walking right into the arms of Dr. Worley himself. Instead, a slightly older version of the green boy from the video opened the door, with a shy smile in his face. You're not blonde anymore, he said towards me. From closer up, I noticed the massive bags under his eyes. His voice had gotten deeper, but I guess so had mine. Nope, grown out of that, I guess. I hesitated for a moment before going in for an awkward hug. And nice to meet you finally in real life, Helen. Is this your first time in Wotton? She nodded. Yeah, it's nice, she said with a friendly smile. Ain't no need to be polite. It's a garbage town. The only reason that I still live here is my grandpa. Lee laughed and welcomed us inside. I'd been here before. I mumbled as we walked inside the house. Lee's parents had passed away when he was very young. His grandparents were the ones who raised him, but apparently his grandmother had recently died as well. Oh, yeah, you came here sometimes after the show when your mom would work. You remember that? I asked. He shook his head. No, not really, but we have some photos. I don't actually remember a lot from back then. Yeah, it sounds familiar. Have you been in contact with any of the other actors from that show? The girls, Helen chimed in. I chatted with Janie a few times, around the time that I talked to you guys as well. I got my phone and sent him the response that I had gotten from her the other day. He nodded knowingly. Yeah, that's pretty much what my last interaction with her looked like. Lee got us some cups and coffee and we sat around his kitchen table. It didn't take long for us to feel comfortable with each other, and the longer that we talked, the more memories of my past came back, but still nothing about filming the show. You know, I was actually a little nervous when you sent me that mail. Thought that it was some kind of trap. It sounds ridiculous, right? Lee said while he poured coffee in our cups. Trap? Helen raised an eyebrow. From who? I don't know, Dr. Worley. Lee laughed nervously. Or the producers of the show or some crazy fan maybe. Although that's not plausible as the show doesn't even exist. What do you mean it doesn't exist? We have the tape right here. Helen responded and pointed towards her backpack. Yeah, I mean there is this one video. That's it though. They aired the same stuff every day for like a year. Wait a sec. He left the room and we heard him go upstairs. Do you think that we can trust him? I whispered towards Helen, to which she only shrugged. Okay, this is everything that I've collected so far. I know that it looks a little obsessive, but well, it's been a rough couple of days. Leah was back with a pile of papers, photos, and notes. It's the only thing that we ever filmed. Except I don't think everybody that watches it sees the same thing. And well, you guys kind of proved that theory. Helen saw some scavenger hunt, right? That's what it looked like to my grandpa too. But this show was popular with other children. I remember people in school telling me for years how obsessed they were with it. Well, then why did it get canceled? I asked to see whether Lee's theory would confirm the things that my mother hinted at. Because something strange seemed to happen to some kids who watched it. They would disappear. Some apparently started taking it out on their pets and some even themselves. I finished his sentence. That's what it looked like. I don't know. This is so messed up, Helen mumbled. We went through some of the articles and it was true. There is a series of seriously messed up events taking place. For a while, nobody realized that it was connected to Dr. Worley's Adventure Club, but then more and more parents found notes from their children saying that they were going to explore a new world or similar stuff. The show was canceled shortly after that. What is this? Helen asked as she held up a photo. A photo of the four of us with Dr. Worley taken in the studio. Except Millie's face was blackened out. On top of her head, someone had written, "Murderer" in red letters with an arrow pointing towards me and Lee. Lee didn't say anything for a little while. It seemed as if he was carefully collecting his words. Janie sent this to me, he finally said. That photo had woke something up inside me. Not a visual memory, but a feeling. A terrible feeling. Suddenly the jingle made its way back to my mind, but this time, the sound was followed by a cry. My hand started shaking and I started sweating nervously. Lee, is Millie dead? He looked me straight in the eyes with a look that matched mine. I don't know, he whispered. I can't find any information about her. Sorry, Lee, but this is getting really strange. Helen quickly got up from her seat, her expression a mix of fear and disgust. I'm not buying this. You forgot about being part of some murder show and happened to remember it at the same time as Alex. I felt terrible seeing Helen so freaked out, and for bringing her here at all. We never even thought about Lee being dangerous, but what he said next made me understand everything better, even if it didn't necessarily help with the fear. I know how eerie this sounds. I'm going insane myself, and Ted and Alex reached out. I don't know that. After seeing that tape, man, I was so messed up. He took a deep breath. The memories didn't come out of nowhere. I heard that intro song, the weird melody. Where did you hear it? I added in a louder voice. I heard it on the radio. Well, my grandpa and I did. He's got dementia and doesn't remember much about anything. But when that spot came on, he suddenly whispered, "Dr. Worley," and he smiled at me. I had forgotten all about it for so many years, but after searching through our basement, I found that tape. Helen and I shot each other a look. The spot, was it for a burger place? I asked. Not sure if it was burgers, but I think it was called Larry's Wine and Dine or something. I got up from my chair, adrenaline was rushing through my body. I don't think that radio spot was a coincidence, Lee. Not if I heard it in a whole different state. I think Dr. Worley is trying to reach out to us. We had already come too far to just give up. Helen and Lee agreed. We needed to figure out what had happened all those years ago and whether it was now somehow repeating itself. Because right now it felt as if Dr. Worley was planning a comeback of some sort. We had dinner with Mr. Grass, Lee's grandpa. He didn't seem to know who I was, but as soon as I saw him, I started remembering the afternoons that I would spend here with Lee and his grandparents. I even believed that Janie and Millie were here from time to time. I didn't ask Mr. Grass about it, however. Lee said that it's better not to ask him about things from the past, as it agitates him sometimes. So we had a nice dinner and played some card games, after which Mr. Grass went to bed. It was already pretty late at that point, and Lee invited us to stay. I was reluctant at first, but we had come all the way and Helen thought that it was a great idea. I guess the mistrust she had towards Lee started vanishing the more tired that she got. Helen was now lying on the sofa snoring loudly, while Lee and I quietly went through some more of the clues that he had collected. You know, it's alright if you go to sleep too. It looks like you haven't done that in days, I said. Lee just shrugged. Nah, I'm okay. Every time I try to close my eyes, all I see is that video. I took a deep breath. I understood what he meant. It was the same for me. The empty eyes of that child being impaled by the candy cane were burned inside my mind. What exactly did you see, Lee? I asked. Before answering, Lee got up and got 2 beers from the kitchen. He offered me one, but I declined. After taking a big sip, he finally answered. There was the intro, then some stuff that didn't make much sense. We were speaking and singing in some strange language with voices that I didn't recognize at all. It honestly sounded alien. Yeah, I saw something like that, and we were dancing in circles or something, I added. You know what the weirdest part is? Those words don't make any sense at first, but I think that there's some logic behind it. As in, there's a repetition of things we say and it all sounds kind of similar. Do you think they taught this to us? Because at first I thought it was just random BS, but maybe they put those words somewhere in a script. I hadn't even thought about that. To me, it just sounded like gibberish. Anyway, after the already weird scenes, it got really messed up. He started whispering, I think I killed someone. I mean, I don't remember, but there was this scene and Dr. Worley gave me something and... A candy cane, I interrupted. Lee shook his head. No, it was a plastic bag. And then he whispered something in your ear. You went to get some kid, a little girl, and then I put the bag over her head. My breathing was getting heavier. We both saw kids being murdered, or at least that's how it appeared. Was the girl Millie? Is that why Janie sent you that picture? No, I'm not sure what Janie meant by that. I'm thinking maybe she saw something else on the tape. Maybe we did hurt Millie. I don't know. I don't know anything. Lee was fighting with tears. I understand what this looked like and how he was feeling, but I simply couldn't accept that we supposedly killed any children. I mean, we were children ourselves, for God's sake. I put a hand on his shoulder and tried to comfort him a little, even if I didn't exactly believe the things that I was saying either. It was a show though, right? I mean, maybe we just remember it wrong. Maybe it wasn't made for kids. Maybe it was some horror stuff and we were just too young to understand. No, Lee interrupted me. Because after that scene, the camera got really close to my face. The morphed face, and it said that it was my fault, and that my parents died and that I should follow them. He took another sip from his beer. They died in a car crash. I was there as well, and I mean, I was like 5 or something, but I distracted them. I was being annoying and well. What I'm trying to say is that the video was too personal. It wasn't just a scene, it was talking to me. Thinking about it, the things that I said towards the camera were pretty personal as well, even if they weren't as painful as what Lee had to witness. But Helen didn't see that when she watched the tape, and neither did I. That thing is somehow cursed, it's not real, I tried to argue. Or maybe it shows us the things that we forgot, events that really happened, and Helen doesn't see it because she wasn't there, Lee replied. Okay, then how about we watch it now together? We'll know whether we're seeing the same things, right? I suggested. I knew that I had to watch this again, and doing it with Lee, who was an actor in the show like me, made it just a little easier to handle. We turned on Lee's TV and turned the volume low enough so that we wouldn't wake up Helen, but loud enough so that we might be able to hear the made-up language. Lee suggested to film it with one of our phones so that we could try and unscramble the language somehow. The melody was really starting to mess me up. The next parts were exactly the same stuff that Helen saw. This was exactly the scavenger hunt episode that Helen and I had seen. You know, maybe we did imagine things when we saw it. I don't know how, but... Stop! Helen shouted from the sofa. She was sitting up straight now, shaking and breathing heavily. It wasn't my fault. It wasn't my fault, she muttered. Hey, it's fine, you're okay. Try to breathe, slowly. I walked over to the sofa and took her hand. Her heart was beating like crazy. Hey, it's just a nightmare, you're safe, Lee said and came closer as well. Helen furiously shook her head. It wasn't, I saw it. I saw him. Who? Both of us asked at the same time. After a moment, Helen's pulse became slower again and she slowly calmed down. I woke up when I heard the jingle. To be honest, I just wanted to see how you guys were reacting to the thing, 'cause you saw different stuff when you watched it. She took a deep breath. But then it changed. It was different. You don't have to tell this if you don't want to. We get it, Lee said. It's okay. I was pretty drowsy, so at first I thought that I was just imagining things. The children, well, you were talking nonsense again, but then it changed. Dr. Worley invited a child inside. Lee and I shot each other a knowing look. We were both afraid of what Helen might say next. The boy looked like a patient that we had. He was the first person that I ever saw die. It broke my heart and spirit back then. You have no idea how hard that job can be. It's not possible, Helen. You were just sleepy. Maybe you imagined something. Lee tried to comfort her. But the worst part was seeing you, Alex. You came really close to the camera and then you told me that it was all my fault. The next morning, we made a plan. We looked up Larry's Wine and Dine and realized that it wasn't that far away from here. It was actually in one of the towns that Helen and I had passed on our way here, Martin. Martin, freaking Martin, I exclaimed. Well, now we know for sure that it's a trap. Why else would they air it where we live? Martin isn't even in the same state, Helen said. And as if that wasn't strange enough already, Larry's had only opened about 2 weeks ago. You guys sure that it's a good idea to go there? It's pretty obvious that it's a trap, Lee said. We were already in my car driving through the alleys surrounded by nothing but trees. I asked Helen if she wanted to go home after last night. I offered her to take my car and leave. I was honestly feeling terribly guilty to have sucked her into this madness, but after the initial shock wore off, she was even more determined to solve this mystery. I think that video made it personal for her. I had been too afraid to say these words out loud just yet, but there was something else that I started worrying about. Helen didn't just see a man in the video. It was someone who had really died. Did that mean that the children Lee and I saw really died as well? Did we just forget? Hopefully, we would find some answers at Larry's Wine and Dine. We weren't going to go inside. It still felt like a trap, but driving there in the middle of the day, just to see what that place seemed safe enough. We parked far enough away so that whoever was in there wouldn't see us. It looks more like a diner though, doesn't it? The aesthetics don't really match Wine and Dine, Helen said. Yeah, and it's kind of old school. I can't really recognize any people inside though, it's too far away, I added. But check the walls, Lee said. They were purple, a very familiar shade of purple. Guys, Helen whispered, do you see that man behind us? I turned around and saw a man in his 40s sitting on a rusty bike. His face wasn't pointed towards us, but instead, it looked as if he was staring inside the diner. He was wearing sunglasses and his hair was shorter, but I would recognize that face anywhere. It was Dr. Worley. Crap, did he see us? What do we do? Should I drive? I started panicking, but before I could actually start the engine, Lee had already opened his door and was rushing out. It all happened pretty fast. Helen and I shot each other a quick look before we followed Lee, who was now storming towards the man. Before any of us could react, he had punched Dr. Worley right in the face. Dr. Worley didn't hit back. He just held his bleeding nose and stared at us in shock. It's you, he mumbled. The kids. He kept switching his gaze between us and the diner, his face a mix of desperation and fear. Get out of here, now, he hissed. The door of the diner opened and a woman stepped outside. She must have spotted us because she shouted something inside the diner, but it was too far away for us to hear what she said. Something strange was going on, that much was clear, but I wasn't sure anymore who we needed to be afraid of. Guys, I think we should get out of here, Helen said as she rushed towards the driver's seat of the car. I took another look at the diner where the commotion was getting bigger. I'm not sure if I would end up regretting this, but as I looked at the man with the bleeding nose, I knew that he would have some answers for us. Grab his arm, Lee. Worley is coming with us. I was young, not much older than you guys are now. An agent told me they needed an actor for a revolutionary kids show, and while entertaining children in a place like Watton felt beneath me, I did need the money. And the only reason that I could bear it was by being high as a kite on set. That entire year is just a huge blur in my memory. I always thought it was the drugs, but now I'm starting to understand that there's a lot more to it. Whoever these people are, they're dangerous, but I'm guessing you realize that by now. What brought you to the diner in the first place? How about you answer our questions first, Worley? Lee hissed. We had taken our old acting colleague with us and drove to a coffee shop in the center of Watton. A public place with many people around felt safer for now, until we figured out what he was all about. You'll realize Worley isn't my actual name, right? He rolled his eyes and sighed. Anyway, for years I had forgotten all about the show altogether. I've been living with my sister in Martin, and the other day, we got some vouchers for a new diner. I drove down here to get some food, but as soon as I stepped inside, I heard a melody coming from the speakers inside the diner. Lee and I sang it in unison. Please don't. Worthy said with a disgusted look on his face. But yeah, that song. I turned right around and left. I wasn't sure why, but at that moment that sound just made me feel sick. Like it triggered some PTSD or whatever. On my way home, the memories came back. I called my agent from back then and asked if she still had any copies of the show. She sent me a tape right away, but I could make absolutely no sense of it. It was even worse than I'd remembered. So I thought that I would show it to my niece. She's 8 and I figured maybe I don't get it because I'm too old. What did she see? Worthy's expression darkened. His eyes started watering. I got no clue. All I know is that she was basically glued to the screen and even talked to it. I was there the whole time. I still don't understand what she was seeing. You guys were there and the 2 girls, but everything you said was random. He sniffed. That night something happened. My niece disappeared. We don't know how it happened, but the next morning she wasn't in her bed and she didn't come home again. Police couldn't find her, and there were no clues left. She even took her shoes. They don't know what happened, but I do. This show does something awful to children. He started staring into the distance. The 3 of us stayed silent. To any other people, Worley's story would have sounded like madness, but we knew better. We had seen the tape. Of course, the first one they blame is the ex-junkie uncle, and hey, I get it. But I had nothing to do with it, I swear. The whole mess is repeating itself. Worley finally whispered. So the rumors are true, Helen asked. I heard about it back when we were filming. I never believed it, if I'm honest. It sounded like baloney. Stuff like that happens a lot around here. Wanton isn't exactly a safe place, but when the little blue girl was taken years later. Wait, what blue girl? Are you talking about Millie? I almost shouted. Lee looked as shocked as I did. You don't remember? Worley asked. Although, as he said those words, something was coming back to me. I remembered meeting them again, but we were older. 15 maybe. Lee was there, and Janny and Millie too. Was that the last time that I talked to her? We had a reunion. Lee whispered as if he had just read my mind. Worley nodded. There was a discussion about bringing the show back, for an older audience. Alex here had moved away and I was pretty opposed to it, but the network had pressured us to talk about it again. A week after that, the girl vanished and that was the end of the discussion. Apparently she left a goodbye note, but they couldn't make much sense of it. My hand started trembling. This was getting way too real. We were children, but you weren't. You were an adult. How could you let this happen? I shouted. Worley hit his fist on the table, making the cups in front of us spill. Do you think I would have let my little niece watch this crap if I knew? I had forgotten just like you, but I've spent day and night researching trying to remember her. Lee put a hand on my shoulder. My heart was still racing. Quiet, guys. You're attracting a lot of attention right now, Helen whispered. We paid the check and got back into the car. This doesn't mean that we did it, Lee whispered in my ear as we made our way to the car. We don't know what really happened to her. We got back to the car and I started driving. We were headed to Lee's home first, where we would drop off Helen. He didn't like his grandpa being alone for too long, and Helen volunteered to go back and take care of him. Lee and I would then go somewhere quiet to chat to Worthy some more. While we didn't believe that he was exactly dangerous right now, Lee also didn't want him in his home, which was also understandable. I tried contacting my old agent again, but she disappeared. I haven't been able to reach her since she sent me that tape. Guys, the show doesn't exist. I'm starting to understand it now. The reason I only remember filming that first scene isn't only because I was high during the other days. It's because we never filmed anything else. The reason they cast us was probably because you kids didn't have any support systems, and all of us were troubled in some way. Worley spoke from the back seat. My grandparents were just happy that I had found a hobby after Mom and Dad had died. Lee mumbled. Yeah, my mom was a drunk who didn't care much about anything at all, I confessed. And I was a wannabe actor on drugs, Worley continued. I have no idea what happened when we were at that studio, boys, but I've watched the tape often enough now to know that those creatures in the show aren't us. They just used our faces. That's what I thought, Helen said. It just doesn't look real. Maybe they used some computer techniques to make those scenes. Yeah, that must be it. They used us for the normal introduction. Maybe as a pilot for the rest, they plastered our faces on something alien. We're at my home, Lee chimed in. Alright, I'll see you guys later and keep me updated, Helen said and opened the door. And don't do anything stupid. She winked and pointed at Lee's hand, which was still bruised from punching Worley. Who is that girl, by the way? A girlfriend to one of you? Worley asked in a dry tone. Helen? No, she's an old friend of mine, I responded. And you trust her? He asked. You should be careful about that. You know, until this point, I actually hadn't doubted Helen's intentions. I've known her for years, but it did seem a little strange that she came all the way here with me to investigate a horror show which makes children disappear or even die. We trust her more than we trust you do, dude. She didn't host a creepy kids show. Lee answered instead of me. And now let's get out of here. If that thing about us in the faces is true, I mean, if those things in there aren't really us, does that mean that we didn't kill anyone? I carefully asked as the three of us drove to the closest gas station. Is that what you saw? Lee and I both avoided eye contact. Right, Worley said. Honestly, I don't know, boys, but I might have an idea how we can find out more. What is it? I asked. Well, obviously we shouldn't go back to that diner, but there is another place that we could check. One right here in Marden. I remember where the studio is. The one where we filmed The Adventure Club. It was an impulsive decision, but it made so much sense. I don't know why we didn't think of it sooner. While the studio might not give us all the answers, at least it could freshen up our memory. The studio was on a pretty quiet street. There was an old cinema and a small restaurant, but we didn't see many people. The building of the studio itself looked run down as if it hadn't been used in years. Are you sure that's a good idea? How will we even get inside? I asked. Yeah, it looks kind of abandoned, Lee added. So what, we'll break in, Worley said as he walked towards the door. He got something out of his pocket and started fidgeting with the lock. After a few minutes, we heard a loud breaking sound. Ta-da! Worley exclaimed and smiled. Easy peasy, it was pretty rusty. Worley walked inside and waved us to follow. Lee shrugged and walked inside. I stayed behind for a moment. It felt like a big deal for me to go back to the place that I had forgotten for such a long time. I needed a moment to collect myself. Go ahead, I'm gonna go check on Alex, I heard Lee's voice say from inside the building. He pushed me outside, closed the door of the building behind him quickly and whispered, We need to go, as he grabbed my arm. We rushed to the car as fast as we could, but Worley was already coming back outside, his eyes glaring at us. He shouted something and ran towards the car. We made it inside just in time to lock the doors. Worley wasn't alone. A woman had followed him outside. Everything was happening too fast for me to understand what was going on. Go! Lee shouted and we drove off. What the heck happened in there? I shouted. We were both panting. Lee held up his phone, which had a text from Helen. I had just realized that I had left my own phone at his home. Helen said, Get away from Worley. I don't know what it's about, but his reaction makes me think that we got out of there just in time. I mean, did you see that woman? Dude, I think I remember her. She was my agent. Lee said in between breaths. My eyes opened wide. That was the woman who would take me to the studio all the time. Call Helen now, I commanded. Guys, where are you? Is Worley with you? She asked over the speaker. No, we got rid of him. What happened? I was watching the tape again, I just had to. And then I realized something. It might be nothing, but it seemed weird. What? Lee and I both shouted at the same time. You know how your faces are normal in the intro but then change later? That happens for the four of you, but not for Worley. He's in the video later again and he looks exactly the same. Didn't he say that he only filmed the intro? And there was something else too. We followed him in his trap. Lee interrupted her. Helen, you need to get out of here. He knows where I live. Please take my grandpa and get the heck away. Helen dropped off Lee's grandpa at a nursing home in a different town, a place where he would be safe for now. We wouldn't want him involved in all of this. What was the other thing you wanted to say about Worley when we had talked on the phone, Helen? I got so worried about my grandpa that we had no chance to finish talking then, Lee asked. The three of us met up again in a motel, hopefully far enough away from Watton. We still had to figure out our next steps, but for now, this place seemed safer than Lee's house. Yeah, crap, I almost forgot to tell you. Her eyes opened wide as she quickly got up from the bed. We were in such a hurry when we left the diner this morning, but I noticed a woman at the door. Oh yeah, I saw her as well, I said. Did you see her face? Not really. I did, and she looked kind of familiar, but I couldn't place her. Until I watched the tape again. I mean, she's gotten older and everything, but I think it was Millie. The rest of the night was pretty quiet. After the initial shock wore off, Lee passed out on the bed. I don't think that guy had properly slept in over a week. Something had changed since the last time that the three of us were together, though. The atmosphere had gotten tense. All of us believed Worley. He seemed so sincere. But then again, he was an actor. Still, everything just seemed too coincidental. Lee and I hearing the same jingle at approximately the same time, remembering everything again now. The fact that Helen had apparently seen Millie and didn't bring it up until we had almost fallen into Worley's trap. Her text came in right at the perfect moment. Were Lee and Helen hiding something from me? As Lee was sleeping, this felt like a good moment to talk to my childhood friend. She came all the way with me and has been going to some massive stress these last couple of days. I don't want to mistrust her, but at the same time, I shouldn't be too gullible either. Want to go outside for a smoke? I whispered. Helen hesitated at first, but then she followed. Can I ask you something, Alex? She started fidgeting with the lighter. For some reason, she seemed more nervous than me. Sure. Why did you want to pick up Worley yesterday? I didn't want to say anything, but it seemed like a dangerous move. Yesterday, that morning at the diner felt forever ago. I raised an eyebrow. So we could find out what his deal was. I mean, he was alone and there were three of us. Yeah, I know, just never mind. Helen, do you not trust me? I told you to go back home. I even offered you my car and... No, of course I do, she interrupted me. I think just maybe there's a reason you forgot some of the stuff that happened. I'm not blaming you or anything. You know that you had always been like a brother to me. Helen, what are you talking about? I was starting to get impatient. You had left your phone at Lee's home yesterday, and I know this is a total invasion of privacy, but to be fair, you should have a passcode or something on your phone, Alex. I don't care if you used my phone, Helen, get to the point. I looked up Janie's mail address and then I sent her another mail, but from my phone. She wouldn't say much to me, but she told me that it was your fault that Millie had disappeared. I tried to explain to her that the tape all showed us different things, that it's not real, but oh wait. She got her phone out of her pocket and showed me the last mail from Janie. I know what I saw and I know that it's true. About 9 years ago, they wanted to bring the show back. We went to a meeting, but nobody really wanted the show to come back except for Alex. He kept pushing aggressively. I don't remember what happened that day, just that Millie was freaked out after it. I know that it didn't really happen in the show because nobody else I showed it saw it, but it made me remember. I know for a fact that Alex killed Millie, and Lee helped him. Do whatever you want with this information, but if I were you, I would get far away from those two. And don't contact me again. I kept staring at the screen, my hands were trembling. Finally, I looked Helen in the eyes. I wanted to speak, but I couldn't bring out any words. No other mail would go through. I think she deleted the account, Helen said. If this is true, why are you still here? Why haven't you called the police or... Because Millie isn't dead. I saw her. You can't even be sure that it was her, I mumbled. No, but I know that you're not a murderer, Alex. There's so much crazy stuff happening at the moment that we can't explain. There must be another answer to all this, and I bet it's hidden somewhere in that diner. Did you show this to Lee? She shook her head. Do you trust him? She stayed silent for a moment. Yeah, she finally said. Maybe just because I had a little crush on him back when we were teens. Helen laughed. But my gut tells me that he's not dangerous. What does your gut say about me? I asked. Alex, I trust you. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. Just try to remember that day. Was there anything that could have given Janie the idea that you had bad intentions? Before I knew what I was doing or could think it through properly, I was already sitting in my car alone driving to Martin. I know leaving Helen alone with Lee was a bad move, or leaving Lee alone with Helen. I still wasn't sure what to believe. Could I even trust my own mind? Right now, I had no other option but to do what I thought was right. It was risky, but the only way for me to finally get some answers, I had to go to the diner, and hopefully end this for good. I had to consciously be there and figure this out on my own terms to really believe my reality. I was the main explorer, right? I always had an issue with being too impulsive. When I have a goal in front of me, I will not eat, sleep, or drink until I get what I'm looking for. And right now, I had to look for Millie. I didn't know if she was alive or if I was responsible for her death. The parking lot was almost empty except for my car and a truck. The warm light inside the diner felt radiating. I peeked inside and saw a man sitting at the counter. There was a waitress talking to him, but I only saw the back of her head. I took a deep breath and I opened the door. I was prepared to be greeted by the strange melody, but instead, regular pop music was playing from the speakers. I walked towards the counter. The waitress had disappeared into the back. So far, I looked far more normal than I would have expected. The man at the counter was drinking coffee and watching something on an old TV. Hey there, take a seat anywhere you like, I'll be right with ya. A young woman in a waitress outfit came out of the kitchen with a plate of food that she brought to the trucker. I sat down at the nearest table to the door, just in case I needed to run away quickly. Would you like to see the breakfast card? The girl stood in front of me and smiled. This was definitely not Millie. Breakfast, I asked. What time is it? I mumbled and took a look at my phone. It was 6 a.m. No thanks, just coffee. I answered and tried to reciprocate the smile. Are you alone here? I asked without trying to sound too creepy. Me and the cook. She responded and started pouring coffee in my cup. A friend of mine works here, I lied. I was just wondering if she was here today. Her name's Millie. The girl shrugged. Oh, yeah, she's in the kitchen. Do you want me to get her? My heart started racing. No, that's all right. I'll have my coffee first. Okie dokie. You know, this is gonna sound weird, but you look really familiar. Have you been here before? The girl asked. Have a great day. I'll see you next time. We heard the trucker shout as he walked out the door. Oh my God, I do know you. You're Alex. The girl's eyes opened wide and her smile got even brighter. But you look a little different and older. I swallowed. I had to get out of here right now. Oh, I think you're mixing me up with someone. I nervously laughed. Oh no, it's you. I'm your biggest fan. I came all the way to find you, she shouted. I peeked towards the television. Worley's Adventure Club was on. Until this moment, this had felt like a regular diner. I guess they were just waiting for the other guy to leave. I got up quickly and pushed the girl to the side. I had to get out. "Alex!" A voice shouted from the back. "Our main explorer." At first, I thought that it came from the television. But this wasn't Worley's voice, and it wasn't the waitress. My hand was clutching the door of the diner. A shiver went down my spine, and I felt like I was frozen. I knew that voice. Slowly, I turned around. "Millie," I whispered. Helen had been right, it was her. She looked slightly older than in the tapes, but just a little. She didn't look like she was 25. More like 16 maybe, but still, she had the same silver blonde hair. The face full of freckles and the smile with slightly crooked teeth. "Welcome," she said. "Millie, what are you doing here? Are they keeping you here? What's today's adventure?" I heard the familiar voices coming from the TV, but something was different. We were older. This wasn't the tape that I had seen. This was from when we were 15 or 16. "What's today's adventure, Alex?" Millie started giggling uncontrollably. "Will you finally film another part? We miss you, Alex." The waitress chimed in. I tore the door open and ran outside towards my car, but I noticed someone standing next to it. Worley, and he wasn't alone. The agent was with him. "Oh, Alex, how you've grown," she said in a melodic voice. And I checked my surroundings and there was nothing around. I could try to run, but where would I go? "Don't worry, Alex, we're not here to hurt you. Look, no weapons." She held up her hands. "I just have a proposition for you. If you don't like it, you can leave." Millie and the waitress had followed me outside and were now standing to my left and right. I was surrounded. "What did you do to her?" I said and nodded towards Millie. "We didn't do anything, honey. We would never have hurt any of our actors. The children love all of you. We went looking for her when she disappeared, but when we saw her hanging from the ceiling of the studio, it was already too late. It was tragic, really." "What are you saying?" "Millie died, but it was not anybody's fault. She chose to do so." "BS, she's right there," I shouted. "That's not her. She's just wearing her face," Worley said in a dry tone. "That's not possible," I whispered. "You really still believe that any of this is normal, Alex? Because I'm afraid you won't find a logical explanation to it. Believe me, I tried. Accept your proposal and all of this will be over for us soon," Worley said. "What happened in the show that you saw, Alex?" the woman asked. A child died and I was talking to myself," I responded. "But what did really happen in the show?" "I don't know, some weird scavenger hunt." "Exactly. That's what most people that are alert see. But if you watch with just the right mindset, your imagination will provide something entirely different for you. You will see things that are hidden inside your mind. Your true wishes, fears, and needs. It's not simple entertainment. It's revolutionary. Our fans from back then, like little Chrissy over there, don't watch anything except for the Adventure Club. They are obsessed with it because it provides a form of guidance for them. Something that nobody else can. They need the Adventure Club. But those kids are growing older and they don't respond to the old shows as well. So you want us to film another episode of your brainwash show?" I asked. I had no idea what the thing she was saying meant, but all I could do right now was to stall time. "We need you, Alex. The children need you, the other actors. They're replaceable. But you are our star. Everyone that watches the show feels like they're talking to you. Come with us and film one more episode, just so we have a fresh recording of your beautiful face. You can leave after that. We'll provide you with as much money as you wish and you'll be left alone." "That face on the tape isn't mine. Can't you just use your technology to update my face and leave me alone? Take a photo or something." "I'm afraid it doesn't work that way. We need you to come to the studio. That's the only place where our cameras work," she added. "What cameras? What are you on about?" "Then make a copy of you. Something that looks like you but isn't. Like that freaky Millie thing over there, Worley said. Hush now, the woman hissed at Worley. The melody came. Surprised by the sound, I looked around me, but it was coming from the pocket of the agent. Oh, don't you just love this tune? She laughed as she got a phone out. I couldn't help but grin as I saw the expression on her face. I have to go. Bring him inside the diner and wait there until I come back, she said and rushed towards her car. Were you involved with them this whole time? I asked Worley as we were back at the diner. They had tied up my hands and sat me down in a booth. Most of the things I told you were true. I really don't remember much of the filming because of the drugs. I probably helped them without even knowing. But I didn't trick you because I'm a bad person, Alex. I really have my niece. This was my only way of getting her back, he said. I nodded. I guess so. So how about you untie me and we get out of here, and I promise that we will help you get your niece back. Sorry, bud, not gonna happen, he responded. Through the window, I saw a light from afar coming closer and closer. Finally, the light kept getting closer and closer before it stopped right in front of the diner. Helen and Lee jumped out of the car and ran inside, both holding up guns. Don't move, Worley, or I'll shoot your face off, Lee shouted as Helen came towards me to free my hands. What do we do with them? Helen asked and pointed towards Worley and the waitress. Wait, where is the Millie copy? I asked. She had disappeared. Screw it. We need to get out of here before the woman comes back. We're taking these two with us. Where the heck did you get those guns from? The three of us were back on the road. We dropped off Worley and Chrissy in front of a police station and drove off. Chrissy had been one of the children who had disappeared after watching Worley's Adventure Club. She was only 6 back then. From what we saw in the news, they thought Worley had abducted her. Of course, none of the things she told them made any sense, and his explanations didn't help either. I felt bad for Worley to a degree, but it was too much of a risk to bring him with us. They're toys, and we brought them on the way. Figured Worley wouldn't know the difference. Lee laughed. This entire plan was risky. We didn't know if this would end things, but from what it looks like so far, nobody was following us. They have more important things to do right now, as trying to get the camera system back. The one that burned away together with the studio. When I read that email from Jenny, it shocked and disturbed me at first, but then I finally started remembering the reunion. The day that we came back together and even filmed a new intro. We were too